John Villarreal from Conservative Media. We're still here at Presidency 5 in Orlando, Florida, and this thing is just going off the chain. And now I'm with U.S. Senate candidate Adam Hasner. Now, Adam, you just won a big straw poll here. What's going on?
Well, we're very encouraged with the results from yesterday's straw poll. I think it's just validating all of the hard work we've been doing. I've only been a candidate for U.S. Senate for 5 months. Some of my Republican rivals have been running for statewide office for years. One has been holding statewide office for 2 years. So I'm just getting started. And so it's a great momentum builder, and nothing's going to change. This is just the beginning. We're continuing to get out. People are getting to know me. I'm getting to share with them about my record of serving during my time in the state legislature. And I'm getting the opportunity to talk about my vision for the future of this country.
So let's talk about that vision. Why are you running, and what would you do to make a difference in the U.S. Senate for the good people of Florida and the United States of America?
Well, the reason I'm running is because this is a three-front ideological battle for the heart and soul of our country. I believe this is a line in the sand moment, that we can put America back on the right course, but it's going to take people who have the courage to stand up and do the tough things, even if it's not popular. And I demonstrated that during my time serving in Tallahassee. I was the Republican majority leader. When Marco Rubio was the Speaker of the Florida House, he selected me to be his Republican majority leader, and we were fighting for a conservative reform agenda. Even back in 2007, when it wasn't popular, Charlie Crist and George Lemieux and so many of the other Republicans were saying that Republicans needed to act more like Democrats. And I think what we need now in Washington more than ever, and I've been saying it a long time, Republicans don't need to be less partisan. Republicans need to be more principled. And I think that's why I want to go to Washington, because it's not just about fighting against the Democrats. It's also about standing up to the Republicans who act like them. And I believe we can turn the corner, that we can restore America's economic prosperity, that we can restore a national security policy based on peace through strength and standing with our allies like the State of Israel, and that we can reclaim our foundational Judeo-Christian values. But it's going to take hard work, and it's going to take people with courage.
I want to talk about a number of those things you just brought up. First of all, it just as an aside, what happened to Charlie Crist, and do you feel like that's maybe indicative of the problem of sort of career politicians or the quote-unquote establishment?
Well, I remember, because I served in the state legislature for 8 years. My first 4 years were when Jeb Bush was governor.
Okay.
It was a different time in Florida. Jeb Bush was a principled leader. He knew what he believed in, and he wanted to advance a reform agenda. Charlie Crist was a much different politician, someone who was more about populism, who was more about what the polls were saying, and the direction that he wanted to go was only based on what his approval ratings were going to be. So he was supporting things that Arnold Schwarzenegger was supporting, the cap and trade policies and all these center-left policies, because they were popular at the time, because Republicans lost in 2006, and much of the conventional wisdom was, oh, Republicans need to be less Republican and more like Democrats. And the reason we lost in 2006 is because Republicans started to act. We lost our conservative values, and so what I think is important to understand is that we need people who aren't just conservatives now that it's popular. We need people who have proven themselves on the tough issues, and I did that during my time in the legislature. I've proven, even in the face of opposition, even in the face of criticism, I'm not going to give in, and I think it comes from the fact that I've been going against the grain my entire life. Many people know, but I'm the son of 2 liberal Jewish Democrats who was born in Brooklyn, New York. My parents, it was kind of surprising to them when I told them at 18 I was going to register as a Republican. So it's about people who are willing to go against the grain even when it's not popular, and I've demonstrated that.
Well, I know what you're talking about. I lived in upstate New York, so I understand that. I want to go back to that. But I guess to put a bullet point on it to make it easy for the folks out there maybe to understand, are you saying that you basically would sort of be a kind of U.S. Senator for Florida like a Marco Rubio?
Well, Marco Rubio and I share our views and really our vision and values. But I think what's most important is we're two very different.
Of course, you're your own person, your own man.
We're two very different people. But going against the grain, recognizing the tipping point where our country is. Marco recognizes it. I recognize it. I see so many of these leaders in Washington Washington right now, the Jim DeMints, the Mike Lees, the Pat Toomey's.
Right.
These are people who are not Ron Johnson from Wisconsin. These are people who went to Washington not to be part of the club.
Senator Rand Paul.
Who recognize that our country is facing a difficult challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
This is one of those generational moments, and I believe we need to rise to the challenge like those generations before us rose to theirs. Senator Rubio recognizes that, and I think so many of us that want to go to Washington right now, it's because 2010 was only the first wave.
Right.
It was only the beginning. Clearly not enough has changed in Washington, and we see it with the results that we're getting right now. 2012 is about sending conservative reinforcements to get the job done. Those people need more leaders up there who are willing to stand up and go against the status quo.
So it sounds like you're saying, which is what I've said before, that this is a critical election, and in a lot of ways, you know, the way of life that we have right now in America may be possibly in the balance, and that we have to do things radically different to get things back on track. So let's talk about policies. Are you for things like a fair tax, which would be a consumption tax? Are you for getting rid of the income tax and getting rid of the IRS? Are you for a zero corporate tax, a zero capital gains tax, or some kind of reforms like that? What about entitlement reforms, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare? Where do you stand specifically on some of those issues to get things back on track here in America?
Well, first and foremost, we need to rein in the size and the scope of government. We need to cut spending in the short term and reform entitlements in the long term and balance our budget. Now, a lot of people ask me all the time, how is it possible for you to campaign for United States Senate in the state of Florida where there's so many people who are on Medicare and on Social Security? Well, here's the reality. Those programs are going bankrupt.
Right.
If we don't do something,
They're gonna be gone.
they're going to collapse on current beneficiaries, and they're going to burden future generations for years and years to come. So we need to talk honestly. We need bold leaders who are going to tell the truth, not talk about in bullet points about fraud and waste and abuse. We need to talk about specific reforms. And when it comes to Medicare, I'm the only candidate in this race that has fully embraced the Paul Ryan plan to save Medicare.
Okay.
And the reason why is very simply this. With healthcare inflation at 7 or 8% per year, with 10,000 seniors becoming eligible, the numbers don't add up. Within a decade, Medicare Part A is going to be insolvent. And so here in Florida seniors have the most to lose if we don't talk about that. We need to protect and save the current system for those 55 and over and nearing eligibility, and get away from all the meta-scare tactics that the Democrats have been demagoguing.
That ridiculous ad they ran.
The ridiculous ad that's just trying to scare and fearmonger, because Republicans are the only ones that have put forward a plan to save Medicare. And then we need to transform the system and create a new sustainable system for people our age, for the next generations. And so I think that's critically important. When it comes to Social Security, the trillions of dollars that have already been raided and have already been spent, we can't get that money back. But what we can do is change the system. We can raise the retirement age. We can change the way that benefits are being calculated. We can provide people with the opportunity to have their own accounts in the future.
Exactly.
That's something that we need to talk about. But here's what's really important, because we can't just talk about cutting. We have to also talk about our roadmap for growth. We have to talk about the things that are going to provide the tax and regulatory certainty so that businesses can make the investments, so that businesses can go out and hire. And so that means radically transforming our tax system. I believe first and I'm a big believer in consumption taxes. When I was a state legislator, many don't remember, but Marco Rubio and I and others led the fight to eliminate property taxes in the state of Florida and replace it with a sales tax. So I'm a big believer in consumption taxes, and I think we need to transition over time into a more fair tax. The reality is, though, first and foremost, we need to get rid of all of the corporate favoritism, all of the loopholes, all of the exemptions in our tax system, and lower and broaden the rates. And we can't compete over in a global economy with a 35% corporate income tax rate. We need to drastically lower it. More importantly, in some instances, as you talked about, even going to zero for some companies, for manufacturing and others, be able to have those types of jobs that'll bring those companies back. Not all of them, but it'll help make it more attractive. And the certainty of the tax system lets those companies make those long-term plans. And then it comes to regulations. None more important than repealing the federal health care legislation. replacing it with a patient-centered.
You're on point today, man. You're just banging it out.
But my message doesn't change no matter where I go or who I'm talking to, and I think that's what's extremely important. And so it's not just Obamacare; it's also the other job-killing regulations that we're seeing from the EPA, Sarbanes-Oxley, which is preventing companies from getting the capital necessary to be able to invest and grow. Dodd-Frank is extremely important to repeal because it's stifling economic growth and capital markets. And then the attacks on what I would say private industry, free enterprise from the National Labor Relations Board. It's not only been anti-competitive, it's been anti-American to see what this NLRB has been doing, not just with Boeing in South Carolina, but with their attempts to force people into labor unions, with their backdoor trying to get a card check passed through the regulatory environment. And so these are the things that we need to be talking about. We also have to have a domestic energy plan. Yep. I'm a big believer in offshore exploration for oil and natural gas, as well as nuclear power and coal and shale technologies, not just because it's going to create jobs, because it will. Also, it's going to make us less dependent and make us more energy secure here in our own country, and I think that's critical for us, especially now where we're sending trillions of dollars to countries that I would say very kindly don't like us very much. And so I think this is the time. And I don't think people are looking for Democrats and Republicans to split the difference. I think they're looking for that leadership. They want us to come out and show what our plan is. Let the president put his plan out about raising taxes 1.5 trillion. Let him talk about more dependency on government. Let him talk about more spending that's piling generational debt more and more every single year. Let them talk about their plan, and then let's talk about our plan. And I think that our vision is going to create more jobs, it's going to provide more economic prosperity, and it's also going to make America more safe and more secure on the global stage.